My wings are given to me in a very formal ceremony down the pub by Mike Owen. Oh, here's your wings. And I'm sure you've seen, I've met a lot of the service users here. I'm generally seen around Aerobility in a smelly old flying suit. But I'm always wearing my wings. I've always got my wings, And some people don't wear them. A lot of people don't wear their Aerobility wings, and that's their choice, and that's fine. I absolutely respect that. But for me, wearing those means so much, not just as a visual symbol to everybody that I've qualified, but it's as a recognition to myself that, after a life of, times giving up when the going got a bit tough, maybe, the one thing that I've done in my life that I'm really proud of is to go literally from death's door to being a qualified pilot. And look, Mum, I did it. It's a constant reminder to me, and constant pride as well. And it wouldn't have happened without Aerobility, without my determination, and without the support of my wife.
And talk about flying then and mental health, because that's something that we often talk about at Inspirability and at Aerobility. How do you think flying benefits mental health?
I can only tell you that if I'm not flying, and certainly during COVID, when we were all locked down, I couldn't have my fix of Aerobility. I get back to dark corners again. So again, I think that's the fact that something to do, something you love doing, whether it's Aerobility or flying or whatever it is. It might be knitting, it might be sailing or whatever it is. Having that love, that passion for something, and you can indulge that and enjoy that, gives you the positive benefits of your mental health. Also, I think that flying an aircraft is, and I think rightly, seen as complex, challenging, with a degree of risk associated with it. And by championing that, by beating that, by succeeding at that, that's obviously going to give you a boost, isn't it? And that's going to support your mental well-being.
So your story as a trustee then with Aerobility, how do you think your story can benefit our Aerobility disabled community and also our viewers and listeners in general?
Well, I think the alchemy is quite simple. You only get out of life what you put into it, whether you're able-bodied or have a disability. And I'm sure that I wouldn't be doing all the things that I'm doing now were it not for the fact that I wanted to put in and contribute. But I'd also like to add and say it's not just about what I've done and not just about me. I'm really pleased to be involved in this today, and I love being involved. And if it does help people, it's great. But I'm not the only success story. See, I can't do a double parenthesis because I've only got one hand. I'm not the only success story of Aerobility. There's a lot of people out there. One chap I know, his mum was told that the best thing he could ever hope for would be stacking shelves at Tesco's. And he flies a plane, he's a qualified pilot. There's a gentleman that not too far away from here who was the only firefighter that I've ever known in a wheelchair. So it is the power of that indomitable spirit that is so important. So it's not just me. It does show that anybody is capable of doing whatever they want to. So just get out and do it.
And in terms of being involved with the charity, what benefits do you think that can bring to both volunteers and to service users as well?
That's a great question. So I draw benefits, speaking from all different angles. I draw from all angles in terms of, as a volunteer, you're putting something into the charity, you're contributing expertise, you're getting out of the house if you're retired, you're being involved in projects, flying to France, building a dream, all these wonderful things. And for the disabled community, you're not alone. You're amongst people with a disability here. And the fact that you're amongst people that understand your challenges and problems is powerful. It's a community centre here. That's what we do, an aviation community centre.
So Neil, you're a passionate aviator. Do you own your own aircraft?
Yep, I've got a Bulldog, a Scottish Aviation Bulldog. It was made in 1975. Ex-Royal Air Force trainer, and interestingly enough, my particular Bulldog was trained the best parts. They trained the Royal Navy pilots, and two of my great oppos, my great lifelong friends, actually flew in her when she was operational in the early 80s. It would have been then, in mid 80s. Yeah, it was over in Australia until January 2020, Before that, I knew I wanted to get a plane for myself. I always wanted a chipmunk, but I went to see a chipmunk, and two things put me off it. First of all, I realized that the cockpit has shrunk over the years since I last flown a chipmunk. It was either that or my waistline had got a little bit bigger. But I was also very keen by that stage that I wanted to put back into the charity, and I knew I wanted the charity to use my aircraft to change lives as well. And the chipmunk isn't really suitable for that because it's got a high cockpit wall, so it's difficult for ingress and egress. Fabric wings are very intolerant of prosthetic legs and wheelchairs. And it was Mike Smith who said to me, well, why don't you get a bulldog? And I hadn't even thought about a bulldog at that stage. But for me, they say that you define the mission and the aircraft will identify itself. What plane do you want, Neil? Oh, I want a chipmunk, I want a Yak 18, I want a Yak 52, I want an RV8. I went through all this whole process. And when you define the mission of the plane will identify itself. So I knew I wanted it to be a bit of a tourer, a bit of an aerobat, really wanted Aerobility to use it. So it had to be robust, it had to have a big canopy. And it was Mike Miller said, oh, that's a bulldog. And I found Eileen's dog, which is what we call it. Eileen's dog was over in Australia, and a group of 4 or 5 of us, 50-plus-year-old men, got permissions off the wives to go via Bangkok to Australia. To bring her back to the UK. I got my Sky Demon out. I thought about flying it back, but then sense prevailed, and we took the wings off it and put it in a container. And it's funny, at the time in 2020, January 2020, when we were over there, you don't realize what a life journey you're on. And someone has said to me, oh, in a few years' time, you're going to go to the other side of the world with a tin leg and an arm that doesn't work, with a bunch of guys in a socket set to get an aeroplane via Bangkok, city of sin. I thought it would be a bit crazy, but yeah, it actually happened. And when we came back to COVID, it took about 18 months to 2 years to rebuild it. And it's over there behind us now. And it's sometime this year, depending on the paperwork, because it's all done the paperwork, we'll be flying it with Aerobility, taking up people for their first aerobatic experience. And I took the first lady up the other day. It was about a month and a half ago, first Aerobility. She's a friend of mine, so not a service user as such, but it was the first disabled person in my Bulldog with me, and it was just awesome. Absolutely awesome. It's a great plane.
And it's great that you're actually giving back to the charity as well.
Yeah, it's as important to me. That's why I want to see Mike Owen or one of the instructors in my plane with someone sitting in the left-hand seat that's not me, someone that might be coming for, or maybe even hopefully one day I'm in the right-hand seat. God, wouldn't that be absolutely wonderful if I could get my instructor's rating. And, I got a photo of me somewhere at about the age of 10, sitting in a Hawker Hunter with a lovely home-knitted tank top on and a Mark 1 helmet, which is 6 sizes too big for me. And I want that for somebody or for a group of people. And that's why the Bulldog, and that's why Eileen's dog.
That's a really good story as well. It's a wonderful story of just giving back, and it's becoming full circle back to charity.
Definitely.
So Neil, you're a very busy person with Aerobility and everything you're giving back to the charity. What do you do to relax in your downtime?
I like exercise. I like cycling. I don't go out on the road anymore. I do miss my bike awfully because it was the way that I would get out and just sort of decompress. But I won't cycle on the roads anymore. Not so much for me, but for my lovely wife, who, probably have a coronary every time I, go out on unlit lanes. So I don't just out of respect for her. So I've got a recumbent trike. So it's 2 wheels at the front, 1 wheel at the back. And I go out and just on Zwift, and I just pedal around the mountains and get myself some exercise. I'm sure I look like a finely tuned athlete to many people. But yeah, it's a great decompression for me. But also, flying is still a decompression as well as support, because it's the only place where I'm completely pain-free. I'm not a bloke with a tin leg and a hole in his head and one arm up there. I'm just another guy on the radio, and it's what I've always wanted to do. So, someone said that when you can't differentiate between your hobby and your job, you're in the right occupation, and it's absolutely right. It's my decompression.
And what would you say if 18-year-old Neil walked in through the door right now? What advice would you give him? And would you want to tell him what was going to happen?
He wouldn't listen. I'd say, don't be so gobby, Neil. Will you please? Will you wind your neck in just a little bit? And the enthusiasm is sometimes too much. But I certainly would say that whilst I never got the privilege of flying my Buccaneer, I would have said to him, don't just give up because you couldn't fly the Buccaneer. Just keep on pressing. But I guess I'm also a bit of a fatalist as well, because if I'd kept on progressing, and if I'd have kept on, and I'd ended up as a lofty captain like yourself, I wouldn't have met my lovely wife. So, I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy with what I'd say, Neil, you didn't do a bad job actually, mate. You found a great woman, and then you got to fly, you got to be a pilot. So, but just wind your neck in a little bit now and again.
So talk to me a little bit about anxiety, managing anxiety. It's something we often talk about on aspirability. Would you ever feel anxious? And if so, what do you do to manage those feelings?
I can't pretend to understand anxiety. I don't suffer with anxiety. I know members of my family do. And I know the worst thing I can say to them is, oh, look, just calm down a bit, because that's just completely wrong. The only close analogy I suppose I've got is that I do get anxious through the fear of failing. And I always want to do the very best I can do. And I had a check ride the other day to get my old license back, to revalidate my old license. And I flew like a complete duffer, to my mind. I thought I had. And I got quite anxious about it the night before, and I was quite punishing of myself the night after. But you realise, actually, hang on a minute, cut yourself some slack here, mate. You flew the plane well, you flew the plane safely, otherwise you wouldn't have worked out. And give yourself a bit of credit. You're a one-armed, one-legged bloke who's able to fly a plane quite well here, so don't be too hard on yourself. And maybe anxiety's got its root in people persecuting themselves. I don't know. So that's my worst thing. I've always got a fear of failing, but I know there's always an answer to it. So if I can't do it that way, I'll do it some other way.
It's interesting that you mentioned fear of failure, actually, because I think that's also very, very important. I think many of us sort of feel like we've got to do something perfectly, and if we haven't done it perfectly, like you said with your check ride, that we've somehow failed. But actually, sometimes good is enough. So what advice would you give to anybody who is maybe feeling slightly paralysed by fear of failure, that it's stopping them from doing what they want to do? What would you say to them to actually just get on and do it?
Give yourself a break. It's you are your own worst critic. Because the reason why you're your own worst critic is because you know your demons. I don't know what your demons are like, but you're the best person to know all your frailties, and therefore you are going to be your own worst critic. But give yourself a break, and there is always tomorrow. And if it doesn't work out this time, try again. And if it doesn't work out there, try again, and just don't quit. That's the worst thing. But similarly, don't beat yourself up when you have those bad days as well.
Because quitting is the only way that you're actually failing.
Absolutely.
If you keep going,
you're still in the fight.
Still in the fight.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
And that, failure is just a path to success.
Yep.
Part of the
deferred failure. What do you call it? Deferred success.
Deferred success. I like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Neil, also let's talk about stress and managing stress. What makes you feel stressed, and how do you overcome those feelings?
I get stressed if I get tired, if I do too much, if maybe there's a lot going on at home, or things aren't going the way I want them to go. Back to this whole issue of single-mindedness, and you've got to recognise that. And the great way that I can tell that I'm starting to get stressed out is my pain starts to elevate, and I can't have that. So I will try anything I can do to try and take the stress out of it, to realise that stress is a normal part of life, it's a normal facet of life, but you have to recognise when it starts in order to deal with it. And when I deal with it, I deal with it through many, many different ways. I don't dive into a bottle of Pinot Grigio. I don't tend to do that. So I like a bit of exercise to work off the endorphins. Love my music, and I love making plastic models. bit of classical music. Just it's a great way of.
You play it or listen to it?
Well, I used to play the guitar, but that's off the agenda now. I did try with my teeth, because Jimi Hendrix did that once, but that didn't work now. But yeah, music's always been a big part of my life as well. So, I'll listen to classical music or blues as well. Just something to decompress with.
And do you have any sort of top tips or suggestions to anybody who's finding themselves in a very stressful situation as to how to remove themselves from a situation, break it down and deal with it?
The American pilots, it's a great analogy this is. American pilots, I remember reading somewhere that the US Navy F-18 pilots were taught the value of the golden second, the golden pause. So your engine fails, and this is definitely me. Straight away, I've got to go to the fuel pump, check my fuel prime, there's my ignition, all this sort of stuff. And this received wisdom that I read was called the golden pause. In that 1 second of immediate response, you're probably going to make a mistake. You're probably going to make a guttural response, which is the wrong one to make. So having that 1 second of breath gives you time to collect yourself, even 1 second, time to collect yourself and address the issue that's at hand. And breathe. Just breathe. The power of just feeling that and listening to that goes back to your mindfulness, whole mindfulness thing. Listen to the breath, slow your breathing down, and it's surprising what effect that can have.
Because it's very easy, I think, in a stressful situation to just plunge in and try to just resolve the situation as quickly as possible, not necessarily in the best way. So the example you just gave about an engine failure, obviously it's a high stress situation. You've got to make a decision under pressure. Do you have any decision-making tools or any tips that you could share for doing that in those situations?
It's interesting. I had an event at Aerobility some months ago where an individual who was in the building had really made me very angry over an issue. The issue and the individual it's not worth talking about. But what is worth talking about is saying that I took that breath and I thought, no, you don't respond, because it's not right. And you're a trustee of the charity, and any response would be wrong. And wow, blimey, by the time I talked that through in my head, my gut response had completely evaporated, and a smile came instead. And I was quite pleased with myself because I'm quite a passionate sort of individual, So buying yourself time with that breath, and if you can, considering the consequences of what you do or what you're about to do, not just for other people, but mainly for yourself, can be very empowering, can be very, very powerful. But heck, it's not easy to do. That's absolutely, especially when you're feeling very passionate about something, or you're feeling very stressed about something, very anxious about something. The thought when all the clangers and whistles and bells are going off to remain, if you can keep your head and what else, all those are losing theirs and blaming it on you. It's difficult, but if you can do that, wow, how powerful a tool is that?
It's like Rudyard Kipling, like you quoted him earlier, if you can keep your head
well. That's all losing theirs and blaming them on you. Yeah, absolutely right. The reason why I'm always bringing that up, because I've got it at home in a copper plate etching that was my grandfather's. And my mother she was always preaching "If" by Rudyard Kipling to me. It's always, and it's there now. I can see it in my study at home. And yes, she's going off with "If" again. Oh, Mum. Yeah. But it's a very good poem. If anyone's not had a chance to read "If" by Rudyard Kipling, it's certainly worth a look. It really is.
Powerful,
yeah, absolutely.
So Neil, in all of your busy endeavours at Aerobility and outside of Aerobility, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome, and how have you overcome that if you've experienced it?
It's a very difficult question to answer, actually. I don't strongly feel an imposter syndrome, because I think that I'm really proud of what I've achieved with the support that I've had to achieve it. But I'm certainly don't feel entitled as well. That's one thing I really, really hate, is people that feel it's their own right to. But I do feel that there are other people out there, especially at Aerobility, who are more worthy of accolade after what they've achieved throughout their whole life. I was able-bodied until I was 46. Some of my peers have been disabled from birth, and they've only had to face these, discrimination and all the barriers up against disabled people. They face it all their lives. I've only had to face it over the last 8 or so years. I keep getting reminded by some of my friends that I'm new to all this. I'm a newbie. And yet, I sometimes feel very lucky that I've had a full-grown, fulfilled life, able-bodied, whereas they haven't been able to have that benefit really for all their lives. So yeah, sometimes I do feel that there are more worthy cases out there.
So Neil, you touched us now on barriers and discrimination facing the disabled community. Let's talk a little bit about diversity and what you think we as a society can benefit from increasing diversity.
Wow, it's a huge question, isn't it? And it's a huge subject today. I'm very old school in a certain sense, but you've got to indulge me on this one. So I'm very fond of the Russian culture. I speak Russian. I learned Russian in the Royal Navy. I'm married to a Russian lady, and so current history notwithstanding, I'm a great fan of the Russian culture. And one of the things that I really admired the Soviet Union for, especially during the Second World War, is that there were no barriers to people participating. I mean, okay, very much it was a sense of need rather than of choice. When everybody was thrown into the front line, man, woman, from whatever, and the Soviet Union was a hugely diverse culture from the far west to the far east, many different ethnicities. And I admire the fact that everybody was pulling together in the same direction. And I think that we are learning and can learn a lot from that. And I think it's only to the better of society where we have people from all different cultures, all different sexes. Well, there's only two, I say all different. That diversity gives a much richer tapestry, and also, I think, allows the subject that I love more than anything else to benefit from each contribution from different people. Everybody's got something to give. When I was a lad, it was the boys were going to be pilots and the girls were going to be nurses. That's, you look at it now in contextual terms of the time. It was right at the time, but it's just not right now, is it?
Is it you're drawing from a bigger pool of people if you've got more candidates, if you've opened something up?
Yeah,
remove
absolutely.
barriers.
Everybody's got something to add, and I include disability in that. A quarter of our population have a disability of one form or another. And speaking to a great gentleman this morning, who's going to do some wonderful things with his disability. Hopefully he's going up to space with his disability. And you think, well, why should we, 20 years ago, that would never have happened. You've got a very articulate, intelligent, sharp person. It would be criminal waste not to see that person doing what they're going to do. So that should apply across the board. And I'm not just talking about race or gender. It's got to be the disability thing as well, because there's so many people that are trapped there in their wheelchairs or in their rooms that have got such a huge amount to add to the subject. It's a criminal waste, quite frankly.
And it's inspiring what you're doing as well with helping Aerobility offer flights to people with disabilities, so that, other service users have said to me that they don't feel like they're disabled when they're.
Like I said, absolutely that. And also, this is why I don't really have much truck with people who use their disability as a lever to get what they want. Don't use it as an excuse either. There's nothing to stop you doing. There's nothing to stop you flying. There's nothing to stop you in indulging your love and passion for aviation whatsoever. Disability, you've got to forgive me, but it is a state of mind to a certain extent as well. I'm only as disabled as I see myself.
Some of the service users have said to me that they feel like they're just another voice on the radio, and that's what they love about it, because it's levelling the playing field.
But also, I think it's pleasantly irreverent here as well. You've got to be very aware of what you're saying in society today without offending people. But here, and sometimes as a disabled person, you don't want to be treated with kid gloves. Like me, I'm a rambunctious sort of person. I like the rough and tumble of it all. And there's a lot of people, a lot of the service users here are like that. We just want to feel normal. I hate that word, normal, but normalised. You just want to be treated the same as everybody else.
With no barriers.
No barriers at all. Not at all.
Anything you want.
Yeah, see.
So Neil, looking back on your journey so far, are there any regrets that you have, or what's your biggest regret?
Well, I've done silly things. I've done stupid things. Wouldn't be human if you hadn't done stupid things. And yeah, I can think of myself as an 18-year-old young sailor over in Chicago doing silly things, but that has no profound, long-lasting effect on your life. And when you ask me about my regrets, anything that's strongly profound that's going to have a bearing on my life. And I think I'm very, very lucky that no, I don't have any regrets. I've married the most wonderful woman in the world. I'm a pilot. I've got a nice house. I've got my health, despite what it might seem. I'm truly fortunate and truly blessed, and I genuinely mean that. I don't have any regrets whatsoever. That makes me feel nice, just even that to admit that to myself. It's cathartic, even just to say that. Yeah, that's quite good.
And in terms of being productive, because you have, like you said earlier, your fingers in so many pies at Aerobility and elsewhere. Talk to me a little bit about procrastinating, something that we're all guilty of. What do you do to not procrastinate, or if you catch yourself procrastinating?
I'm the worst. I'd like to answer that question, but I might do it tomorrow or day after, or I'm terrible. So if something's going to be done by tomorrow, I'll get to tomorrow morning. It's going to be done by 4 o'clock. I'll do it at lunchtime. I'll put it right off until a half hour due before. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm at my best when I'm under a bit of pressure. Maybe, but yeah, procrastination is the thief of time, isn't it? It's terrible. My coping strategy. I didn't realize I was doing this for many years. So you imagine I've got a gap of some 30 years between first flights and Aerobility flights. I didn't realize that I used to love my Excel lists. Always done. They used to take the mickey out of me in the company because I'd have my to-do lists, my checklist. I didn't realize that they were checklists. And I put a deadline next to those, and they've got to be done by. By committing it to a spreadsheet or to paper, it was my coping mechanism to stop this whole procrastination issue. That I am terrible. I'm worse than any of the people out there. That's for absolute sure.
So it's sort of about finding some accountability. You've written it on a spreadsheet
absolutely right.
with a time.
Yeah. Got to check it off. And then there's some sort of perverse thrill then in crossing it off, or even writing something down you know it's got to be done, and you've already done it. I crossed it off now. Yes, excellent. Sad. Yeah, I know. God,
one tip I was once given was to write to-do list and then make to-do list, then you can cross it off. And,
yeah.
And then you feel like you've achieved something, but actually it does, it motivates you.
Yes, absolutely.
To keep going.
Keep going, for sure.
So Neil, looking back on your story so far, what is your proudest achievement to date?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I mean, I'd say the best moment was getting married. That was to my lovely wife. That's got to be there. But she'd be the first person to say, "Come on, spare me that. What's your real best moment in your life?" And it was my wings here at Aerobility. My wings are given to me in a very formal ceremony down the pub by Mike Owen. Oh, here's your wings. Yeah. And I'm sure I've met a lot of the service users here. I'm generally seen around Aerobility in a smelly old flying suit because it's got lots of pockets as you use and it gets covered in oil. But I'm always wearing my wings. I've always got my wings, And some people don't wear them. A lot of people don't wear their Aerobility wings, and that's their choice, and that's fine. I absolutely respect that. But for me, wearing those means so much. Not just as a visual symbol to everybody that I've qualified, but it's as a recognition to myself that, after a life of, times giving up when the going got a bit tough, maybe, the one thing that I've done in my life that I'm really proud of is to go literally from death's door to being a qualified pilot. And it's look, Mum, I did it. It's a constant reminder to me. And constant pride as well. And it wouldn't have happened without Aerobility, without my determination, and without the support of my wife. So it's the triad is built into one. It's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost all in one of my wings.
And what's next for you then? What does the future hold?
Have you got another hour to talk about that? So I've got 5 goals this year. I've just done one of them, which is my night rating. So that's done. I've revalidated my 1985 PPL. which is an old brown leatherette wallet. As one of my friends said, it looks, smells, and tastes like the 70s, and he's quite right. And I've just done the revalidation, my aerobatics rating, my instrument rating, and then to hit 400 hours before the end of this year. So I came to the Aerobility with a grand total of 57 hours to my name. And I should be hitting 400 by the end of this year, which is that's what I really want to do.
Good going.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, it's a lot of flying, and I'm just loving it. But I want to find out a way of getting my instructor's rating. That's what I really want to do.
So your next passion is to instruct?
I love people. I love putting back in, just this whole giving back. And the thought, I'm sort of jealous of Mr. Owen because he's doing a great job teaching people like myself to fly. I don't ever think I'll get to that stage because, in the mid-50s now, and it's probably a bit late to try and aspire to 5,000 hours and blah, blah, blah. But, I can still get it at some level, and I just need to work out what level that is at the moment.
What do you think makes a good instructor out of interest? Or good teacher? Patience,
not over teaching as well. Some can over teach. I used to have an instructor in the Navy that physically slapped me from the back of a chipmunk once, which I thought was a hell of an achievement, and also I was wearing a helmet, so patience is one thing, and the guys here, I've got buckets of that, but also they need to rethink the wheel. So I was convinced that I needed to have electric trim when I first started to fly here, because how can I trim an aircraft by taking my hand off the control column? And then Mike and JJ, who was my instructor, I don't think you met JJ, he was the deputy chief flying instructor here until COVID. It's this patient approach and rethinking the wheel. You don't need to have an electric trim, Neil, right? I fly a circuit slightly differently to everybody else's. So it's that ability to look at things in circumspect and think, well, if it doesn't work that way, let's try something else. And also a degree of levity as well. You can't be too serious about it. You can't take yourself too seriously.
And you're sort of adapting. So what you've just said is you're adapting the aircraft or the facilities around you to what you need, and so that you can still do what you want to do.
Absolutely. I think that other training in able-bodied environments is quite prescripted. It's quite laid down, and certainly what we do here is a very, very circumspect approach. So, well, if it can't work that way, what about this way? Or I can't control my upper body because I have a high up spinal injury. Oh, well, let's think of how we can strap you to the chair to stop you falling over. It's trite, but it's rethinking things that enables you to cope with your flying strategy. If you live with cerebral palsy and you've got poor motor control, I know some of my colleagues find it very difficult to press a very fine button on an electronic display, for example. What they might do is, if they have two radios, they might pre-program all their frequencies in. So all they've got to do is go bang, 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 and overcome and be quite flexible in the way they overcome their challenges, all to get down to the same aim. And that comes from the inspiration from the instructors.
And it's not just in the aircraft either, it's adapting outside in life in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think disabled people tend to be a bit more adaptable than able-bodied people, because you have to rethink the wheel, you have to rethink your life. How do I handle a keyring? They are my nemesis, opening a keyring. But find a way with a screwdriver, it's all doable. So I think disabled people generally a bit more adaptable than the able-bodied equivalents.
I think it's a really important message, actually, that all the examples you're giving are of how you can take control of a situation and how you can adapt a situation to facilitate you doing what you still want to do and to achieve.
Do you know what's really interesting there is that you touched on something quite important to me, and my wife says, "Oh, you're just fencing with words here, and it's just semantics." And I say, I try not to think like a disabled person. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a question now. I want you to butter some toast for me. Show me how you butter some toast.
Well, I hold the toast in one hand.
Right. Okay.
And I get the knife.
So there's the problem I've got. All right. So straight away. So how do I'm now thinking, well, how am I going to butter the bread like that? Well, I don't do it like that anymore. I think, if you think like a disabled person, if you think like an able-bodied person, you won't move ahead. If you accept the fact that you have a disability and adapt to that, then you will. So for example, when I'm in a hotel, I ask for those little packets of butter, which I can open up my teeth and then smear it on the toast like it's It's like it's cement, you know, and it still works. So you have to rethink things, and get creative.
So you're adapting your environment around you.
Yeah. And I
suit.
hate using adaptation aids. So, for example, go back to the buttering toast example. Occupational therapy came out in the first few weeks I was at home, and they gave me a wonderfully manufactured toast holder, and it looked like a triangle, two edges like this, which you put at the edge of your worktop, and you butter away from you like this with this toaster, and it held the toast for you. And I thought, yeah, it's great, but what happens when I go to the hotel? Or do I have to take that with me wherever I go? So now, if haven't got the sachets, I put the piece of toast on the plate, push it up against the toaster, and I'll butter away from me towards the toaster. It just rethinking things, just framing things differently, and you can do it whatever you want, but whatever you put your mind to.
So in terms of your story of adaptability and your journey in general, what do you think, or what do you hope someone listening to this could take away from your story, and not just in the disabled context, but perhaps in the broader context?
Absolutely. But just give it a go. You think to yourself, well, I can't do it this way. Well, why don't I try it another way? Why don't I take another approach to it to achieve the same aim? As long as you come together in the same place, it doesn't matter how you get there or even how long it takes. It used to take me an hour to tie my shoelaces. I discovered a new knot, a one-handed knot, which I can do in 5 seconds now. We got to the same place. I both got tight shoes. My knot doesn't look like your knot or anybody else's knot, but it's the same. It achieves the same aim, same goal.
Neil, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting and inspiring to talk to you, because it's been such a powerful story of overcoming adversity and adapting to a new normal, but also of how you've remained positive throughout with your positive mental attitude and attitude of gratitude and lifelong commitment to optimism, and also giving back as well. So thank you for your time, and I wish you the very best of luck with your future projects. And I'm very much looking forward to going up in the Bulldog with you anytime soon.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers.